In today's video, you'll get a quick introduction to descriptive statistics, which is one of the first things you want to do whenever you start working on a new data set. Because what you really need to do is get a sense of the data that is in front of you. So what are the variables you have? How they're distributed? Do you see any patterns that is particular or that is worth investigating further? And one of the best tools at your disposal to do that is the histogram. Okay. So how do we read a histogram? Well, first of all, we need to look at the bins. So a bin, for example, is here, and this corresponds approximately to the values between 4.5 and 4.6. So that means that approximately 9.5% of Russian counties had an average household size between 4.5 and 4.6. Now, here, I just allowed my statistical software to choose the bin size. And in most cases, that's a good idea. And the choice that your statistical software will make will be a good one. But there are cases where you will want to change the bin size because the automatic bin size will prevent you from observing certain patterns, okay? So, for example, if there are too few bins, then there are certain interesting patterns that may not be visible. But on the other hand, if there are too many bins, then suddenly there can be some noise that makes it more difficult to observe general patterns. So here, for instance, well, we can see that most of the data seems to be concentrated between maybe something like 4.4 and 5.4 approximately. And then the tails of the distribution, so that means the extremities of the distribution, are relatively small. Okay? So we see that, for example, the smallest value seems to be around 3.8, and the largest one is going to be around 5.9. So the distribution is relatively compact between those values. Now, another reason why histograms are super helpful, especially when you start investigating a data set, is that it allows you to detect outliers. So, for example, here we're looking at the distribution of the sale prices of slaves in Louisiana. Okay, so this is based on a very large historical data set with more than 100,000 observations, where every single observation is a record of a particular slave in Louisiana. One of the variables that is recorded in that data set is the sale price of those slaves. But when we just plot the histogram of that variable, we see a very interesting pattern. Okay? So it seems like all of the observations are really concentrated in the leftmost part of the plot, and probably between 0 and 10,000. But the fact that the statistical software decided to show up to 200,000 means that there must be some observations that are here, okay? Probably extremely few, which is why we can't see anything. Actually, here, we can see a tiny, tiny bit, and there's something. If we zoom in, we can see that there are a few observations here, okay? So just by looking at that histogram, we can tell that there are huge outliers. So we would not be able to analyze that histogram without first cleaning the data, okay? Because those values are going to completely skew our analysis. So here, the fact that we just see that very big bar and then almost no observation anywhere else is an indication that there's an issue with outliers. Now, obviously, one thing that you could do is restrict your analysis to observations where the price is, for instance, less than 10,000. And then if you ask your statistical software to plot that distribution, you'll see a distribution that looks a lot less strange than what we're observing here. So histograms are for interval variables, okay? But there are plenty of other variables that you can come across. In particular, you can come across categorical variables or ordinal variables. And for those, the histogram is not the appropriate tool. Instead, what you should draw is a bar chart. And the bar charts can be used to display the frequency distribution of categorical variables. And here, we're just looking at the distribution of the literacy levels of prisoners in Paisley Prison from 1841 to 1883. Right? And we can see that there are different categories. So cannot write, illiterate, read and write a little, read and write tolerably, read and write well, read a little, etc. Okay? And for every single category, we also see the percentage. Okay, so for example, the percentage of prisoners who are illiterate is slightly less than 25%. Whereas the percentage of prisoners who can read and write a little is approximately 40%. Okay? And so here, the big difference is that for each value that the variable can take, you have a distinct column. Whereas for a histogram, you have bins where different values are binned together. So for example, if we look back at our graph, any value that was between let's say 4.5 and 4.6 would be in the same bin. So if you have a county with an average household size of 4.55 and another one of 4.56, those two would be in the same bin. Whereas when you look at a bar chart, every single value will be displayed as a separate bar. Okay, so that's why it's ideally suited to categorical variables and ordinal variables. So that is it for today's video, which was an introduction on descriptive statistics. And in the next video, we'll have a look at different measures of central tendency.